The subject of my talk is English as core infrastructure. English as a national development tool. English as strategy. And the context of taking up this subject is this. On June 19, that's about 2 weeks ago, a cabinet minister of the government of India at a book launch said this, and it was reported in the Hindu. So it's not from my memory, it is from the Hindu. This is what he said. Those who speak English in India would soon feel ashamed, and the creation of such a society was not far away. Without Indian languages, we cease to be truly Indian. I believe the languages of our country are the jewels of our culture. Without our culture, we cease to be truly Indian. With self-respect, we will run our country in our own language and lead the world too. So the usage is singular. India's own language. I would not say anything uncharitable about the speaker of these words, because we don't expect politicians to speak after introspection and study. They are birds of passage whom the people elect for a 5-year term, and there they go, and therefore they tend to speak in these kinds of statements that are really very, fragile and not something very enduring. However, some of the ideas in the statement could be commented upon. First of all, this idea of our language, our Indian language, versus the foreign language, it's kind of xenophobic thing, we versus the rest. And that isn't really true, because we all both English and the major Indian languages, that is Sanskrit, Hindi, Gujarati, trace their roots to a common linguistic ancestor, the Proto-Indo-European language, PIE. That was spoken around 4,500 to 2,500 BC. From Proto-Indo-European emerged several branches. The Germanic branch, the Indo-Aryan branch. Now, it is clear, therefore, if you look at linguistic history, the history of language, that the English and Indian languages are linguistic cousins sharing a common lexical and structural ancestry. So, that is a part of history which it is good to know. Even in the development of all these Indian languages, and I speak in plural, scholars from other countries made massive contributions. In my own language, Malayalam, which is a Dravidian language, with a little bit of Sanskrit thrown in, as different from Tamil, which has no Sanskritic influence, which is a sovereign Dravidian language, which has such a rich history. The history that goes back to about 300 to 400 years before the Christian era. That is Tamil. In fact, Tamil has no Sanskritic roots. The Sangam poetry does not at all refer to divine inspiration, nothing at all. That's different from the Sanskritic tradition, where there is a lot of God coming in there. That is basically humanism, the love of beauty, the love of music in words, is saying in words that it should sound good. This is about 300 years before the Christian era. To that extent, it predates the Renaissance and the Enlightenment, where the thinkers and writers of that time, exemplified by Shakespeare himself, that extraordinary poet and dramatist, did not speak too much of the divine. They spoke of the human being, and to that extent there is a parallel. Not that one flows from the other. I'm saying how these languages express themselves at various times. So I was speaking about the Tamil language, the Dravidian language, which continues to this day, an unbroken history, an unbroken cultural tradition, Tamil language. So we are beginning to think of the many instead of the one. The many traditions, the many languages that make up, that are there in this country. I was telling you about Malayalam. I must have known that Hermann Gundert, a German scholar and linguist, compiled the first Malayalam English dictionary in 1872. He made significant contributions to Malayalam grammar and literature. Significant contributions. Compiled grammar books, edited Malayalam folk tales and proverbs, published the first journal in Malayalam in 1847. The name Rajya Samacharam. The first printed newspaper in Malayalam, 1847. Well, there are a number of people who were scholars, who, for the love of scholarship and for the love of India and its people, wrote books of seminal knowledge, fundamental to the development of India's languages and the understanding of our people. Verrier Elwin, anthropologist, worked closely with Adivasi communities and published outstanding works. The Tribal World of Verrier Elwin, The Religion of an Indian Tribe. Then there is Professor Asher, R.E. Asher, who compiled what a stupendous work, the Encyclopedia of the Languages of South Asia. Works extending to a study on Tamil and Kannada. There was George Grierson, who did what is called a linguistic survey of India in 1903, that period, 1903-1928, documenting the hundreds of Indian languages and dialects. Therefore, when we speak of language, we are speaking of a plurality of Indian languages, not one. There is no such thing as one Indian language. It is a plurality of languages. And we cannot forget that the dialects, the unspoken traditions of the original inhabitants of our country, Adivasis, which translates into the original inhabitants. Not only in the Northeast, not only everywhere, all along the place, in Kerala, the original inhabitants of our land. And their dance forms and their traditions, their worship of ancestors, their worship of the time cycles, the kinship with nature, all these things are common not only to the Adivasis of our country, but common in the original inhabitants, say, of America. The original Mexican civilizations, the indigenous tribes, who all believed in these types of things, including the worship of their ancestors. Therefore, there is that famous exchange between the Indian tribe chief and those gun-toting American settlers. There they stood against those guns and said, with tremendous dignity, how can you take away our lands? The lands belong to us. The lands belong to our ancestors. They are there on the mountains. Their spirit is with us. How can you take away our spirits? How can you take away our ancestors? So, this is the beauty of the many against the single, the one. We must respect the many in our language history. So that is about language. Now the statement also speaks about, or mainly speaks perhaps, of the creation of a society where it would be a shame to speak in English. What is the reality? The reality today is that all the countries that matter, China, Vietnam, South Korea, Singapore, Saudi Arabia, UAE, all of them have developed a strategy of English language penetration so that it becomes a national knowledge infrastructure project. Singapore did it long ago, the emphasis, because that is a society of different peoples and ethnicities. But China's strategy for the English language as a strategic tool for global integration, a scientific and technological leadership, economic competitiveness, and educational leadership of the world. Their Chinese universities rank among the first 20, many of them. Our universities are down in the 200 and the 400. I refer to the few rankings of the IITs. The others are of very indifferent quality. National English proficiency standards have been aligned with global benchmarks. Every global benchmark. And the more important thing, and that is common now, China, Vietnam, everyone, is that this is not confined to urban centers. The penetration goes into the rural because China's aim is to build a knowledge society. We have heard of an agrarian society, an industrial society. Now China speaks of a knowledge society aligned with a global knowledge society. This is the vision, and this is bound to come with technology driving this scheme. Digital and remote learning infrastructure is being advanced at a terrific speed. And joining in are important companies. Platforms like Tencent's digital volunteer teaching. Tencent's digital volunteer teaching covers 100,000 rural students. That is the pace at which English is being developed as strategy. And if you want to use the word that is used nowadays, weaponizing the English language. There are schemes of continuously raising the pedagogical teaching capacity of English among teachers in rural schools. In other words, these countries are moving to a knowledge society with English as core infrastructure. The direction for us is pretty clear. And that cannot really be determined by the politicians alone. People will determine that. There are certain areas where the power of events will play their parts. And this is one of them.